Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where something we've been talking a lot about lately is Nate Parker and how he botched the PR job for the release of his film, The Birth of a Nation, that he was unable to get the film out from underneath the dark shadow cast over it by the scandal from his past. And the reason I bring it up again today is because I want to contrast it to the masterful PR move or PR strategy that Daniel Craig began to execute over the weekend as he tries to return to Bond. A similar situation, well, obviously not anywhere near as serious as the Nate Parker situation, but a situation of his own making, where Daniel Craig has cast not quite as dark a shadow, but still a shadow over the Bond franchise with all the negative things he had to say about being a part of it, to the point where I think it did affect Spectre. I know a number of you said you didn't want to see the movie because you knew he didn't enjoy making it, and I think that it was impossible to watch Spectre without being like, this is Daniel Craig's last Bond. It even had a finality to it, and I think that it was written so that it could be his last Bond if it wanted it to be. And I think that they have been searching for a new Bond. Tom Hiddleston's name was flirted with, and then he flirted with Taylor Swift, and everyone said, ew, and so that ended, thankfully. I think he'd be a horrible Bond. And there just really isn't anyone else to go to. Hugh Jackman has said now he's ready to take it on after being approached, a couple of years ago and turning it down. But I don't think that he's a good choice either. So, I don't think there's anyone exciting enough to really make it worth giving up potentially a couple more Daniel Craig James Bond movies. And it seems that he wants to do it. So now comes the hard PR work of having to turn this narrative around. We've spoken a lot about that as well, crafting narratives for movies, from the actors having to do it. We do also talk about whether or not they're still movie stars. But when there is a star, when there's an actor, they're responsible for helping to shape the narrative of a movie. Not just the movie, but their experience with it, their relationship to the franchise, their relationship to the fans of the franchise. Look at the narrative that Jennifer Lawrence has found herself in when it comes to the X-Men movies and Mystique. It's all incredibly important. So Daniel Craig, I didn't know if he could really come back from the comments that he said, but apparently he sat down with his team and he came up with, I think, a really good strategies. I've repeated it to a couple of people, and every single one of them, even the most ardent Daniel Craig is out people, it's given them pause. All right. So what he said was, it's like you guys asked me if I wanted to return as James Bond after I just finished a grueling shoot. So it's a lot like asking someone as they're just about to finish a marathon if they want to run another one. And of course they're like, hell no, I don't want to run another one. This is torture. But you give them some time to recover. You give them some time to reflect, to heal. And of course they want to go back, right? And he said, I would miss being James Bond. He said, the direct quote is, I would miss it terribly. And he said, there's no other experience quite like it. I would also say there's no other paycheck quite like it. He reportedly turned down $90 million to make 2 more films. But when they couldn't find anyone else, the Broccoli's, who are the ones who are responsible for the Bond franchise, they haven't picked a studio yet. They don't know if they're going to remain at Sony or not. But they came back to him with a $150 million offer for 2 more movies. And I think anyone would run another marathon or 2 more marathons for $150 million. That is an amazing paycheck. And, so the question is, all right, the money's good. We do like Daniel Craig as James Bond, but he hurt our feelings. How can we take him back? How can we shift gears, as I said? How can we change the narrative? And I think this is something that I'm willing to buy into, and I think a number of other people would be willing to buy into. It's a very strong argument that he just was in a bad place, and now that he thinks back to it, just like, I said recently I rewatched Skyfall, and I think I enjoyed the film more than I ever had in the past. I really thought it was well done. And it made me once again realize how much I like Daniel Craig as James Bond. And so it kind of puts me in the same position where I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I'm not ready to let you go either, Daniel Craig. And again, there's nobody else good to go to. So let's do it. Let's do it, man. I'm going to take your excuse. I'm going to buy your excuse, and let's move forward. I don't want to see Christoph Waltz come back, though. I don't care what narrative he comes up with. And I would like to see a new chapter for Bond. I think Spectre, as I said, was crafted to possibly be the end of Daniel Craig's run. Let's let that at least serve as a way to close that chapter of his life, close the book on that saga, that really mopey, depressing saga, and let's have him have a little bit more fun. My favorite moment in Spectre was the line when he said that to that little mouse that was in the room, and he said he pulled a gun on it because it surprised him, and then he realized it was a mouse, and then he said, "Who sent you?" It was like one of the most charming James Bond moments, I think, of all time. And now that we have a great M and Q and Miss Moneypenny in position, I think, and they're lighter than the Judi Dench relationship that he had with Daniel Craig when that was together. I think we can really be off to the races with like 2 fun Bond movies starring Daniel Craig. I'm very excited about the idea, and let's see if Nolan wants to come back now that he's made Dunkirk. He has said very aggressively that he would love to make a James Bond movie. Sam Mendes basically made them for him because I think he's copied that style quite a bit. But I don't know, maybe Jonathan Nolan too. You can give me the cheaper Nolan, but if Christopher Nolan would maybe consider it, let's see if he can do an even more Nolan-esque Bond movie than the one Sam Mendes delivered. So I'm all for this, and I think that Daniel Craig has given me the excuse I needed to hear for me to let him back in. So I think it's a really good example of good PR, and it's a nice thing to contrast to the bad PR we've been covering over the last couple of weeks. All right, now speaking of bad PR, Disney's Mulan really stepped in it yesterday with an open letter to Disney saying, please don't make this script that it's come into my hands. And there was the hashtag Make Mulan Right that trended for just a little bit. I think that the theory was the rumor was so out there that I think that was one of the reasons it was hard for it to gain traction. Also, Disney brilliantly refused to comment on it, and so that really starved it of any oxygen to keep it going. So here are my thoughts on it. When I first heard the rumor, I thought that it was a lot of people were upset with that open letter to Warner Brothers, and that really kind of threw Wonder Woman under the bus. And I felt almost in some ways it was maybe like a Warner Brothers fan trying to get back at the main competitor for Warner Brothers, and that's Disney, right? By creating an open letter that really threw Mulan under the bus, a film everyone's very excited about, has a release date. Of all the live action movies fairy tales they've been talking about lately, this is the only one that has a release date, November 2018. So I think that to me, that's kind of almost how it felt, because the story was so ridiculous. For those of you who don't know, it was reported through this open letter that Mulan the lead in that movie would be a white male character in his 30s, who was a trader who came to China, as so many traders did in that time period, and he was a real womanizer, a real sleazy guy. And by meeting Mulan, at first he was just attracted to her, and he decided to stick around because he's like, she's hot. Let me see if I can make that that lady soldier fall in love with me. But then throughout the course of the film, he would realize not only that she was more than just hot, but that he would learn to respect women. That sounds just so horrible. So as you can see, it's hard to believe that would be true at any point, right? But then I saw some rumors of people, who had connections to, I think this is Vulture, a reporter at Vulture who had an inside source with the production, that said that script in fact was real, but it was only a jumping off point. Disney had purchased the script. I guess they liked certain aspects of it, and they were going to give it to a new team of screenwriters, Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver, more on them in a moment, and have them rework it. But that there would be no white characters or no lead white characters in the movie. That everybody would be Chinese. That was something that the source said, please get out there, right? Or not please, because Disney again very brilliantly stayed mum on the whole thing. But that was the report. So I don't know why Disney would purchase the script at all. I think the script sounds really horrible. I think that maybe they would change this to an Asian male lead and make it, still keep the respect women storyline aspect to it. I don't know why they would do that. I mean, Disney's been on a roll lately with female characters that don't have a love interest. Merida, Elsa, Moana. It's been very well received, and if anyone has never needed not to have a love interest, it's Mulan, because her story has nothing to do with romance, okay? There's just so much, and there's so much other stuff going on. It's not like she needs filler, right? So I would be very disappointed if they made those changes. However, I have to say to anyone who's worried about the Mulan movie, have faith in Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver. Rick Jaffa and Amanda Silver are an incredible screenwriting duo. They got their start with The Relic. They're very big in the science realm. They did the first two Planet of the Apes movies, the new ones. They're doing the Avatar films, and they also did Jurassic World, which I think when you look back at Jurassic World, I would urge you to take a second look at it. Once the disappointment of it not being good as the first Jurassic Park kind of like passes, it's actually a very solidly made movie, and it's a lot of fun. And I think that Disney hired them because they're going to have take their science qualities and apply it to history. So have faith in that writing duo. They're very, very strong. They've written strong female characters in the past, and I think they're going to do a really good job. So I have a lot of faith in this team for Mulan. I think it's going to be really good, and so I would just move past this. And I think that letter never should have been written, and I just, it's so early in the production. I don't know. I think that the Asian community is doing a great job getting Hollywood to start giving them more work. You're seeing an almost immediate response to that, and especially in the TV space with the fall season. I'm very impressed with the opportunities that have popped up, and also this Mulan movie is a major opportunity. So let's not freak out just yet. Let's have faith that Hollywood and Disney in particular. I mean, they did right with the Jungle Book. That they're gonna do a good job. Also, a BTT viewer said, "What about Jian Ting?" She's from Kong Skull Island, The Great Wall, and the upcoming Pacific Rim 2. She's big at Legendary. Why doesn't Disney recruit her? She'll be familiar to American audiences by the time their Mulan comes out. And she's a Chinese actress. I thought that was a very good idea. All right, so speaking of gender swapping, let's move over to the third story of the day, and that is that Styx Entertainment had a very big hit this summer. Their biggest hit to date, Bad Moms. Get this, it made $170 million worldwide. $170 million on just a $20 million budget. And I think there's more money to come because it's going to probably do very well on streaming. I think there's going to be a curiosity factor at this point where you're like, well, everyone saw Bad Moms, or like a ton of people did. I should check it out, especially at such a low risk price point, right? So Bad Moms, huge hit for Styx, the biggest one they've ever had to date, and they're very excited about it. So they're going to do a reality TV show based on it. This is a franchise for them. They're going to do short form digital content, and they're even going to see if they can do consumer products. I think those are all great ideas. But here's the real kicker, and this is why we're covering it today, or discussing it, and that's they're going to do a Bad Dads spinoff July 14th, 2017. What? That's crazy. They're going to take a female comedy and they're going to gender swap it in the direction to men. The only other story we've really seen about this is Channing Tatum and Splash. I think that's very clever. I think that's, a really great commentary because they also switched the Tom Hanks role. Daryl Hannah and Tom Hanks' roles are getting gender swapped with Channing Tatum and Jillian Bell. But to just take a comedy that was a big win, one of the only big wins for women over the summer, and switch it to male leads, there's just something about it that's like, I've entered the Twilight Zone, right? Although I have to say, from a business standpoint, this is a really good idea. But I do think that, especially because Bad Moms, from someone who is a woman who reports on the industry, etc. It is unfortunate because Bad Moms was the focus of an article in the Hollywood Reporter, and that talked about a conference where women were talking about the fact that it's still very difficult to pitch women to star in movies in Hollywood. Hollywood still is like, for instance, with The Arrival, they were like, why can't Amy Adams' character be a guy? And it's like, so frustrating. So to see one of the rare successes, like bona fide, there's no strong male lead or male character in the movie at all, success, go over to guys is really tough. Like, why wouldn't they make a Bad Moms 2? I was wondering that when I was making my notes for this story, and it occurred to me that they were like, we don't want to pay those people more money. We want to keep the budget low, and you can better, I'm sure they did not build in a sequel into those contracts, because who would have ever suspected that Bad Moms would make so much money, right? So that means Mila Kunis, Kristen Bell, and the other actress's name escapes me at the moment, so she probably wouldn't cost very much money. But Catherine Hahn, I think, right? So anyway, they probably would want substantial raises and maybe even some back-end participation. So why pay for that? Why not get 3 new male talents, get them for cheap, and use the branding to really sell the movie? Because Kristen Bell, I think, was maybe the biggest name there, but there was really no star power attached to that movie, and look how well it did anyway. So I think the brand to some degree could be the star. So that's my take on that. As a woman, I'm disappointed, but if I were the studio executive at Styx Entertainment, I would go along with this. I think it's a good idea, and I think it's very savvy. Also, I don't want to give too much power to Kristen Bell and Mila Kunis and Kathryn Hahn to define the brand. I want the brand to be the star when I do my television show, when I do my digital content, when I do my products. So I don't want to have to pay to use their faces on that stuff, etc. So it's really, it's an unfortunate development, but from a business perspective, it makes total sense. So I'm curious to how you feel on that as well. Then for the viewer question, I had a really interesting one from Christopher McLean from yesterday. So Christopher said, Grace, and I think this is interesting for anybody, all of us who are comic book fans and how we look at comic book movies. So Christopher McLean said, question, when you are reviewing a comic book movie, do you review it from your fan side or from your critic side? I hope my question made sense to you. It does make sense to me. It makes total sense. Yes, I think what I do is that I utilize my fan side. Well, and also I have to say, whenever I'm really into something, I always admit it. I'm a huge Batman fan. I'm a huge X-Men fan. And I've said, X-Men Apocalypse, I think is, more rewarding to hardcore X-Men fans. And I think the Batman v Superman is very inside baseball. So if you're not super into that mythology, and particularly, I think that Batman v Superman is very upsetting to Superman fans because of the way it treats that character, but I think it's fantastic for Batman fans, right? So you have to, it's a very small, specific audience that it targets. Hardcore Batman fans who not only love the character, but are very immersed in the mythology of not just Batman, but the DC universe. So that's super specific. But anyway, so I think that I always try to acknowledge that. But I also always look at, being a critic, I always look at a comic book movie to how a non-comic book fan would perceive it. I think that's very important. And then, from an analytical perspective, I know what the material has the potential to be because I know how it's been explored in the comics. I know how where the character has done the best in the past and been the best received, right? Both in my opinion and in a critical opinion, how it's been received by the other reviewers of comics, right? The industry, right? And also from people who were willing to pay for that story. What was the most successful? What are the iconic storylines? I think that's all very important. But I think also, of course, I'm always very aware of what's in front of me and that it's a separate entity. So I don't think you can review from either or. You can't turn off your fan side, but I think you have to be able to step back and compartmentalize. Just like you have to be able to step back from the film and you have to say, okay, well, I like it, but this is where maybe it doesn't work. And maybe this is why it's not succeeding as much as, I would think it would. Or maybe this is why it's succeeding even though I personally have problems with it. For instance, let's say Suicide Squad, right? So I liked certain aspects of Suicide Squad because I'm such a big fan. I totally, drank the Kool-Aid with the ad campaign. And I thought that some of the things that David Ayer did with the characters were very interesting. Then also, though, from a critic side, I had a major problem with the way the movie was structured. I really felt that it was not a movie. That's why I called it Snapchat the movie, because it was basically run through social media filters. However, critically and from a business perspective, I thought that was brilliant. I thought that was very smart, and I thought that it made the movie had a great repeat watch factor, and I thought that it made it a fun ride for a lot of people, particularly those that didn't have a very strong connection to the characters already, right? They weren't like, what are you doing to characters I love? They were like, I love it, it's new and it's exciting and it's fresh. And also the appeal of Harley Quinn. So that's one side. But then also, not only did I have a problem, my criticisms for Suicide Squad, what I guess I'm trying to say, weren't like, these aren't the characters I know and love. My criticisms largely were with the structure of it as just a movie, right? But then also, as the film did so well, I was able to step back again and say, well, why is it succeeding? Why do people like it? Why is this working? Why is this having a better response than Batman v Superman, right? And so I think it's important. I think that, just like anyone else, I'm, a multifaceted individual, right? So I think that the best thing I can say, Christopher, to your question is the most important factor when anybody's looking at anything is self-awareness, right? Not being too, analytical skills. And so I think that's really, really important. And knowing what opinions and thoughts are coming from what part of you. So I hope that explains it better to you. And I just want to clarify that I would say I would never, I guess the best thing to say is with Ghostbusters, right? Ghostbusters, I know it's not a comic book movie, but it has been a comic book at some point. But with Ghostbusters, I guess I would say I acknowledge that the movie by itself was a B, but as someone who was a really big fan of seeing women in this context and, not just as Ghostbusters, but portrayed in this manner, I had to give it a B+. But that's why that was one of the rare instances where I gave a movie 2 grades, where I was like, yeah, it's a B, but I personally felt it was a B+ as a female moviegoer. And I think so that's another, again, self-awareness. So I'm curious to how you guys feel when you're looking at these movies. How do you compartmentalize? Do you think you're good at being able to tell what criticism and what love comes from which part of you? Write your thoughts down below. Thank you so much for your question, Christopher. I hope that was a good answer. I hope that clarified it for you. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Please write down below what you think today's top 3 stories, Christopher's viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.